Hello everyone, and wishing all of you a wonderful and peaceful day. In today's video, we're going to discover a heartwarming moment as Trieu Duong notices Truc Lam trying desperately to stand on his own for the very first time. But instead of simply watching, he decides to build a special bamboo walkway in the yard to help the little boy practice standing safely and gain strength day by day. Will this simple handmade structure become the first big step in Truc Lam's journey toward walking? Stay with us until the end to find out. And if you enjoy this kind of peaceful family journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next videos. The next morning, the small mountain house slowly woke beneath the soft golden sunlight. A thin layer of mist still lingered over the yard, while the quiet sounds of birds echoed through the trees. Inside the wooden house, Trieu Duong calmly prepared breakfast beside the warm fire. After finishing the morning porridge, he carried a bowl over and gently fed Truc Lam. The little girl sat quietly near the doorway, occasionally looking outside at the brightening yard while eating. Once she finished, Trieu Duong cleaned everything up and prepared to continue the morning chores. That was when movement near the bed suddenly caught his attention. Truc Lam was gripping the edge of the wooden bed tightly with both hands, trying hard to pull himself upward. His small legs trembled as he struggled to stand. Even though his body looked unsteady, determination filled his eyes. Trieu Duong immediately stopped and watched quietly. The little boy pushed against the bed frame once again, using all his strength to straighten his legs. Slowly, he managed to lift himself halfway up before losing balance and falling back onto the mattress. Even though it only lasted a few seconds, Trieu Duong could clearly see the child's progress. Truc Lam truly wanted to stand on his own. A small smile appeared on Trieu Duong's face, but concern quickly followed. The hard wooden floor around the bed was dangerous for a child still learning to balance. If Truc Lam continued practicing alone, he could easily fall and hurt himself. Trieu Duong looked outside toward the empty yard and began thinking carefully. Near the side of the house, several long bamboo poles and a few wooden posts were stacked neatly from previous repairs. The moment he saw them, an idea immediately formed in his mind. He decided to build a bamboo support walkway in the front yard. If the rails were strong enough, Truc Lam could safely hold on to them while practicing standing. The open space outside would also allow the little boy to move more comfortably than inside the narrow room. Without wasting any time, Trieu Duong stepped outside and started gathering materials. One by one, he carried the bamboo poles into the center of the yard before measuring the space carefully with his footsteps. Soon, the quiet mountain morning filled with the sounds of chopping bamboo and hammering wood. Trieu Duong dug deep holes for the wooden posts, making sure each one stayed firmly planted in the ground. After that, he tied the bamboo rails tightly using strong rope, checking every connection carefully with both hands. Several times he pushed and shook the rails to test their strength. He did not want even the slightest risk while Truc Lam practiced standing. Meanwhile, inside the house, Truc Lam continued trying to pull himself up beside the bed. Occasionally, he paused and looked outside after hearing the sounds coming from the yard, curious about what Trieu Duong was building. As the morning sunlight grew brighter, the bamboo structure slowly began taking shape. Two smooth bamboo rails now stretched across the front yard, supported by sturdy wooden posts planted securely into the ground. The height was adjusted carefully so a small child could comfortably hold on to both sides while standing. After hours of work, Trieu Duong finally stepped back to look at the finished structure. Sweat covered his forehead, but satisfaction showed clearly on his face. Although simple, every piece of bamboo and wood carried his care for the little boy. For him, this was more than just a handmade structure in the yard. It was the beginning of Truc Lam's journey toward learning to stand on his own safely. After finishing the bamboo walkway, Trieu Duong stood quietly in the yard for a moment, carefully checking every part once again. The sunlight now stretched fully across the small mountain home, making the smooth bamboo rails glow softly under the warm morning light. He pressed both hands firmly against the rails several more times to test their stability. The structure barely moved. That was exactly what he wanted. Only after feeling completely satisfied did he turn and walk back inside the house. Near the bed, Truc Lam was still trying to pull himself upright using the wooden frame. His small arms looked tired after repeated attempts, but he stubbornly refused to stop trying. Trieu Duong smiled faintly before kneeling beside him. Without saying much, he gently lifted the little boy into his arms and carried him outside toward the bamboo walkway. The moment they stepped into the yard, Truc Lam immediately stared at the unfamiliar structure standing in front of him. The smooth bamboo rails stretched across the yard at just the right height for a small child to hold on to. Trieu Duong slowly lowered him near the beginning of the walkway and carefully guided his tiny hands toward the bamboo rail. At first, Truc Lam simply touched the bamboo curiously. Then instinctively, both of his hands tightened around the rail. The cool surface gave him something steady to grip, much stronger and safer than the edge of the bed inside the house. After a brief pause, Truc Lam bent his legs slightly and tried pushing himself upward again. This time, the bamboo rail supported his weight perfectly. Little by little, his body slowly lifted from the ground. His legs trembled heavily while his arms clung tightly to the bamboo. For a second, it seemed like he might lose balance again, but the stable rails allowed him to steady himself before falling. Finally, Truc Lam managed to stand completely upright. Even though he only stayed standing for a few seconds, the moment instantly changed Trieu Duong's expression. A proud smile spread across his face as he remained crouched nearby, keeping one hand close in case the little boy slipped. But he did not interfere. He wanted Truc Lam to feel that he was standing by himself. The little boy looked surprised by his own success. His eyes widened slightly while he continued gripping the bamboo tightly, almost afraid to let go. His small legs shook under the pressure, but this time he stayed standing longer than before. A few moments later, he slowly dropped back down onto the ground again. Trieu Duong thought the child might become frustrated after falling, but instead, Truc Lam immediately grabbed the rail once more and tried again. Seeing that determination made Trieu Duong quietly smile to himself. Again and again, Truc Lam pulled himself upward using the bamboo rails. Some attempts lasted only a second before he sat back down. Other times, he managed to remain standing much longer. The bamboo walkway quickly became more useful than Trieu Duong had imagined. The rails gave the child enough support to practice safely, without fear of falling onto the hard wooden floor inside the house. At the same time, the open yard allowed Truc Lam to move more freely while building strength in his legs. As time passed, the little boy slowly became more confident. At one point, while holding tightly onto the rails, Truc Lam carefully shifted one foot slightly forward. The movement was small and unsteady, barely even a step, but Trieu Duong noticed it immediately. His eyes followed every movement carefully. For him, even the smallest improvement mattered. The peaceful mountain yard soon filled with quiet determination. Only the sounds of rustling trees, distant birds, and the soft tapping of tiny feet against the ground could be heard. After nearly an hour of practicing, Truc Lam finally became exhausted. His arms loosened around the bamboo rail, and sweat lightly covered his forehead. Trieu Duong gently picked him up and carried him back toward the house. Even while resting against his shoulder, The little boy continued glancing back toward the bamboo walkway outside, as if he already wanted to return and practice again. Trieu Duong looked once more in the simple bamboo structure standing under the sunlight and smiled softly. He understood that progress would take time, but as long as Truc Lam kept trying, he would continue doing everything possible to help the little boy grow stronger day by day. In this heartwarming mountain life story, Trieu Duong notices that Truc Lam is trying hard to pull himself up and stand beside the wooden bed. Although the little boy struggles to keep his balance, his determination touches Trieu Duong deeply. Worried that Truc Lam could fall and hurt himself on the hard floor, Trieu Duong decides to build a safe bamboo support walkway in the front yard. Using bamboo poles and wooden posts, he carefully creates sturdy rails for the child to hold on to while practicing standing. After hours of work, the simple structure is finally complete. With Trieu Duong's support and encouragement, Truc Lam bravely grabs the bamboo rails and slowly stands on his own for the first time. Even though his legs tremble, he continues trying again and again, showing incredible determination and taking his first important step toward walking independently.